This is Good Morning Transfers. The battle to sign Benjamin Sesko is on, but will he choose Manchester United or Newcastle United? Eddie Howe sends a warning to Alexander Isak as the striker seeks a move away. We've got the latest coming up. Chelsea summer spending goes past £250 million. We'll assess the business they've done and who they might target next. Tottenham bring in their sixth signing of the summer. Will Thomas Frank continue to be active as HeungMin Son departs? And we'll explain why Porto fans were left looking like this. Good morning to you at home and those watching on YouTube. Welcome to European football expert Kevin Hatchard and to Dan Kahn too. We're going to start with Newcastle United. What a few days it's been for them. We are going to go to the club's training ground shortly to speak to our reporter there. But first of all, with Dan and Kevin, we're going to be talking about Benjamin Sesko because that's who Newcastle are targeting, but so are Manchester United. Right, Kevin, the demand for Sesko, why is there such a demand? And remember, Arsenal have wanted him in the past as well.
Yeah, I think because he's got so much potential in terms of his physical gifts. He is unusual in the sense that he's very tall, but he has pace as well. He has an incredible ability to strike the ball. Some of the goals that he's been able to score, really quite phenomenal. He scores all types of goals. And actually in a poor Leipzig team last season, he was still able to deliver. He was still able to score goals in the Champions League, still able to score goals in the Bundesliga, and he didn't let his head drop even though heads were dropping all around him. And the season before that, he showed some promise as well. So he started to get that consistency into his game. And I think it's the fact that he's got quite a high ceiling that's attracting clubs to him.
Right, we can get more on this now and go, as we promised, to Newcastle United's training ground and speak to our reporter Pete Graves. Right, Pete, Alexander Isak, I'm going to start with him before Sesko. He returned to the country this weekend after that rejected bid from Liverpool on Friday. Is there any sign of him there today?
Not yet, Tom. No, I'm watching. I'm here. I'm watching. No cars have come down the lane yet. This is their club's training ground. Before I talk about the football, little weather report. Storm Floris. Winds of up to 85 miles an hour predicted today. Rain. Hope it's lovely in the studio for you three there. Hope you're having a great day. It's chilly here, but the weather in some ways reflects Newcastle United's transfer window, doesn't it? It's been a very stormy time here up on Tyneside. As you say, Isak is back in the UK. We believe he's here in the northeast. We still don't know whether he's going to come here to the training ground today, but we're keeping a close eye on it. The rest of the squad, without Alexander Isak, have all been on a flight overnight. They played in South Korea in Seoul yesterday, drew 1-1 with Tottenham Hotspur. Their flight back with Eddie Howe and all the rest of the squad has landed in the last sort of 20 minutes or so, so they're also back in the northeast now. Whether Eddie Howe comes here and then meets with Alexander Isak today is yet to be seen, or whether that may happen tomorrow, we'll have to wait and see. I believe there was a short delay on the flight back from South Korea, so you've presumably got a lot of tired players and a tired manager there arriving here back on Tyneside today. But clearly the situation needs resolving as soon as possible, with the season getting closer all the time. And there were some quotes from Eddie Howe yesterday. He told the Daily Mail, and this is as strong as I've heard Eddie in a long time, talking about Alexander Isak. He said, "You have to earn the right to train with us. We are Newcastle United. The player has a responsibility here to be part of a team and part of a squad. You have to act in the right way, so that is also at play here. No player can expect to act poorly and then train with the group as normal." So clearly a warning shot from Eddie Howe towards Alexander Isak. He's not gone on this pre-season tour in Asia. He's not played any pre-season at all. The official line is he's got a thigh problem, but as we've reported, we understand that he wants to explore his options away from Newcastle United, and we know Liverpool are there. They've made a formal bid, 110 million plus add-ons, and our understanding is that Alexander Isak is looking at that offer, of course. Well, not the offer, because that hasn't been accepted. Newcastle United want £150 million. That's the asking price, clearly some way away from that Liverpool offer. But can they resolve things, or will he be sold? The club have got a big decision to make on what they do with Alexander Isak.
Yeah, you're in the right place, I suppose. So when he is there, we'll find out whether he's training with the team or not to start with. But what about replacing him if he goes, of course, because he hasn't gone yet? A bid has gone in for Benjamin Sesko. Where do we stand with that?
Well, yeah, Newcastle United looking for a player. Well, they need a striker anyway. There was an argument that they needed 2 strikers before this window started when they thought they were going to have Isak in the squad next season. Callum Wilson has gone, of course, on a free. He's signed for West Ham. They have William Asula, who can play up front, but he's still very young, still very raw. So there was some suggestion before this window even started that they'd be looking for 2 strikers. Now with this situation with Isak, clearly there's a huge necessity to bring in more options in the forward line. Benjamin Sesko is seen as a player that can not only lead the line for Newcastle United here, but a player who is good enough, if Isak were to be sold, to fill his boots at St James's Park. So Sesko is the one that they're looking at. We know that a formal offer went in on Saturday. We think that's close actually to what they're looking for as well, RB Leipzig. I think that the offer was close to the asking price, but they're now just looking at the structure of payments and not very far away from being accepted is my understanding of that situation. And Eddie Howe will be hopeful that Sesko can come here to the club and be a key player for them next season. There is, of course, this worry that Manchester United are also looking at Benjamin Sesko, although at this moment in time, the only offer on the table for RB Leipzig is the offer from Newcastle United. And Sesko, we understand, is intrigued by the project here at Newcastle United as well. And clearly, Sesko is the sort of profile of player who could come in, and certainly Newcastle United supporters would be excited by a signing of his stature. So it would certainly soften the blow if the club decided to cash in, sell Alexander Isak. We know if they do that, it's going to be a Premier League record transfer because they've already knocked back 110 plus add-ons. So if Liverpool are going to come back in, they're going to have to come in higher than that. So it's likely to be a Premier League record as far as the transfer fee is concerned if they decide to sell Alexander Isak. Of course, the coming days, today, tomorrow, and what that sort of relationship is like between Isak and Eddie Howe when they're all back together here behind me is going to be key. Interestingly, Eddie Howe, when speaking about Isak, we know he's been training in Spain, Real Sociedad, his old club. I don't think there was so much a surprise from the club that happened because a lot of Isak's team are still based in that part of the world. However, Eddie Howe revealing that he actually found out about that through the media, which tells a lot, doesn't it, about how much the player and Eddie have been speaking. So, yeah, it's a tricky situation, but if Sesko can be secured from RB Leipzig, like I said before, I understand they're not too far away now in terms of the fee. It's just the structure of payments. If that can be agreed and they can bring Sesko here, then that would certainly appease the supporters, I think, and to some extent, Eddie Howe.
Yeah, deadline day is 4 weeks today. I've got a feeling that you and Eddie Howe will be very busy in that time. Pete, thank you. Right, OK, so we've got Kevin and Dan with us. We talked about why the demand is so big for Sesko, but of course, we are now comparing Sesko to Isak because it might be one out, one in at Newcastle. How different are they as strikers?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, physically, they're significantly different. Isak is a lot more polished in what he does, but of course, that's been a process. There is still a rawness about Sesko. But you look at his journey, he was at Salzburg and he took a while to get going there, but once he did, he started to score goals. And I do think he's dynamic enough, I do think he's physical enough to deal with the Premier League. And what I like about him is that he's not scared to try things. There was a goal towards the back end of last season that I commentated on against Bayern, where the goalkeeper, Jonas Urbik, was a long way off his line. A lot of players would just lift that ball over the top of the goalkeeper. He went, no, I'll just hit it with the outside of my boot.
Yeah, we've
just backed myself.
Show that goal a lot, and rightly so, because it is.
It's an unbelievable goal.
It does stand out.
And he strikes the ball beautifully. Decision making sometimes needs a bit of work, but he's 22. So I think clubs are looking at him and thinking he's got a high ceiling.
But then, Kevin, I wanted to ask you how, maybe right now, as you mentioned, comparing him to Isak is very different compared to when Isak first joined from Real Sociedad. So when Isak joined Newcastle initially, he felt a little raw in terms of his finishing. So where would you compare Sesko's development to maybe where Isak started when he first came to Newcastle?
Yeah, I think that's fair actually, because the leap that Isak has made was not guaranteed, and there've been a lot of Premier League clubs that had looked at him and nobody pulled the trigger until Newcastle made that move. And that was always the question, could he translate what he'd done in La Liga to the Premier League? And he's been able to do that. It was interesting, there were a lot of comparisons between Sesko and Gyökeres with Arsenal, because Arsenal have been very interested in him for quite some time and then pivoted to Gyökeres. Gyökeres is probably a win now guy. I think in 2-3 years' time, Sesko, I think, has that higher potential, but I think he can score goals in the short to medium term as well.
So, Pete did say how a deal between Newcastle and Sesko might be close, and there was a big but there, wasn't there? Manchester United could come in as well, and he could go there. Would Manchester United, Dan, potentially have the upper hand because of Rasmus Højlund? Where does he fit into that deal?
It's very interesting, and I think Manchester United's window is going to be very interesting going forward until this deadline. And we know Manchester United have been having conversations with RB Leipzig about what a deal could look like for Sesko. But in terms of what that looks for Rasmus Højlund, let's not forget they spent £72 million on a 20-year-old Højlund just a few years ago. And although Højlund has come out in the last few days to the press out in America saying, I want to fight for my place, no matter who comes in, we understand United would consider a potential offer if it suits the player and club. Of course, United need to sell players as well to raise more funds if they are to strengths in midfield and up front. So very interesting. All I would say, though, is for Rasmus Højlund is, you know, he gets a lot of criticism scoring 4 goals in the Premier League last season. But we can conclude last year that the whole team really struggled under Amorim's new system while they were getting used to it. The team now, compared to where Højlund joined 2 years ago, had the likes of a young Alejandro Garnacho, an injury-ridden Anthony Martial. Marcus Rashford was struggling for form. You look at the team now, even if Sesko arrived, having Mbeumo, Cunha around you, Bruno Fernandez, it's just a completely different team. So I personally think Højlund maybe just needs a bit more patience to be given to him and see how he works with this refined and fitter, as Amorim has said out in America, team that has had more time with him in his system.
Would he fit in at Leipzig, though, if Leipzig did want Højlund as part of this deal, or separate deal, or loan maybe? Would he fit in there? Would it work for Leipzig?
It would. They've looked at him before. They've been credited with an interest in him before. He's somebody, I think, that would fit their style of play, somebody that does want to run in behind, does want to make those runs. I know his link-up play can be a bit ragged, but I agree with Dan, actually. I think there's a quality player there still. I think it's crazy to give up on him at this stage because so many players have lost their confidence there. It's been a really difficult club to judge players at. You look at Xerxes, gone there with a decent reputation, and it hasn't happened for him either. But the fact that he's still willing to give this a go and fight for his place, I'd give it a little bit more time, but I understand the financial imperatives that United have.
Yeah, well, lots going on at Manchester United, and one player who looks to be staying is Bruno Fernandez. It comes as Al Nassr failed in an attempt to sign the Manchester United captain. You may remember Fernandez rejected the chance to join Saudi Pro League rivals Al Hilal earlier this summer, right? But Dan, how important is it that they keep him?
Yeah, I mean, on that point, we understand, in recent weeks, Al Nassr, of course, a prominent team out in Saudi Arabia, have also failed in an attempt to sign the Manchester United captain. And I mean, his importance is unparalleled when you consider where would United have been without him last season. And you just look at his statistics there last season. I mean, Kevin, you can look at it as well in terms of give that a bit more context. But, considering how much of a struggle it was for United last season, he was pretty incredible individually.
Well, it's a pretty damning statement if you let a player of that quality and that importance go. And I think he is an identity figure. He is somebody that does grab games by the scruff of the neck. I know he has had criticism sometimes for some of his meltdowns in the bigger games, but actually, you look at the body of work in general, is very, very impressive. And perhaps most importantly of all, Ruben Amorim, time and time again, speaks up for him and talks about how important a player he is. So to let him go, effectively for financial reasons, I think is a really bad look. So I think it's really important they keep him.
But there are players who Amorim does want to leave, isn't there, Dan? Garnacho, Anthony, Sancho, Malasia. They all need to find new clubs this summer. But it's looking at this stage, with 4 weeks left, it's easier said than done.
Absolutely, and I think they all have their own individual circumstances. With Jadon Sancho, we reported last week, Borussia Dortmund could be potential suitors once again for Sancho, but there's going to have to be considerations on Sancho's part with his salary demands. You look at Alejandro Garnacho, and we'll be talking about Chelsea very soon. We know they're very much, admirers of Garnacho, but they have other targets they're trying to get over the line perhaps before they pursue that deal. Terrell Malasia has just not played a lot of football, so when clubs look at him, very difficult to have an evaluation on him as well. And Anthony, we've seen he was very good at Real Betis, but again, is there a market for him right now in terms of his wages and the fee United would want for him? We'll have to find out, but I don't think United's window is by far done anytime soon, but there's a lot of incomings and outgoings, but they also have to keep the sheets balanced as well.
Yeah, there are some quotes from Amorim on Garnacho in particular, by the way. Here they are. It says, a really talented boy, and sometimes things don't work out. You cannot explain specifically what it is. But I have the feeling, I think it's clear that Garnacho wants a different thing with a different leadership. And I can understand that. So I think it's not a problem. So that's Amorim on Garnacho. One player who has gone, or at least temporarily, is Marcus Rashford. Kevin, he's gone to Barcelona. But is he going to be allowed to play? What's going on with his registration?
So we're back again to Barcelona and their registrations. Because of the financial issues they have, it's not easy for them. They don't have a lot of wriggle room in terms of the salary cap with La Liga. So they haven't yet been able to register him. Now, he's spoken to the media about this. He says he's relaxed. He says that he's happy to let the club get on with it. But if you look at the situation currently with their goalkeeper, Marc-Andre ter Stegen, now he was their undisputed first choice, but he was injured last season. Wojciech Szczesny, who came in to deputise for him, has been given a new contract, even though he was brought out of retirement for that gig. Joan Garcia's come in from Espanyol. He's going to be the number one. So you've got a situation with ter Stegen where Barca would quite like him off the wage bill. He's injured at the moment. And the club know that if he was out for 4 months injured, then they would get some relief from the salary cap for his wages. He made a very pointed statement with this back injury and said, I'll be back in 3 months' time. So he's aware they're trying to shift him on.
Play the game, come on.
But this is the interesting...
Just say it's 4.
But this is the problem, you see. You've got a situation where you've got these battles of wills all the time. You've got players they're trying to shift out who don't really want to go. And so it just shows you Barcelona have this wider issue. But if they can sort out the wider Rashford situation, I think it's great for everyone. He gets a fresh start at a big club. They get somebody who can cover multiple positions. United get him off the wage bill.
Yeah, I agree. Right, loads on the way this morning as Tottenham say farewell to HeungMin Son. And could Darwin Nunes be set to leave Liverpool? That and much more on the way. Got some breaking transfer news, actually, and it does involve Newcastle, but it's not Alexander Isak. It is instead goalkeeper Martin Dravka, because he has emerged as a primary target for Burnley. So he'd be staying in the Premier League. We're told that talks with Newcastle are understood to be progressing well over a permanent deal. Dubravka's in the last year of his contract at Newcastle. Now, why do Burnley want a goalkeeper? Because they lost James Trafford, who could have gone to Newcastle, but instead chose to go to Manchester City last week. So Burnley are trying to replace Trafford with Dubravka from Newcastle, and talks are progressing. Permanent deal. Now let's get to Liverpool, and the future of striker Darwin Nunes looks to be up in the air. The Athletic are reporting that Al Hilal have made him their priority target. Right, Dan, why would Liverpool be open to offloading him?
Well, I think there's a few reasons, Tom. I think, first of all, overall, since he made that £85 million move in June 2022, I don't think we can necessarily say with confidence that that move has necessarily worked out for all parties. I don't think Darwin Nunes has necessarily improved his finishing in front of goal. And we also saw how Slot played last season as well. The likes of Luis Diaz played in that 9 role. We also Cody Gakpo as well at many a time. But we've also seen Liverpool be incredibly efficient selling in the last few years as well, raising so many funds. Luis Diaz to Bayern Munich, for example, in just the last few weeks. And as we're talking about this potential move for Alexander Isak, it's not a bad thing for Liverpool to raise more funds for a move like that. If you're looking to spend over £120 million, if they do try and match what Newcastle are trying to ask for Isak. What I would say for Darwin Nunes, though, for the player side of things, Al Hilal, I mean, he has some pretty decent service there with the likes of Ruben Neves, João Cancelo as well. So there's some Premier League well-known players, former players, who would give him pretty good service, I think, out in Saudi Arabia.
And he played for a great coach as well in Simone Inzaghi. And Inzaghi's believed to have really kind of pushed this. And I think he's somebody that can be frustrating, but I think he's a thrilling player. I think he's really dynamic. You never quite know what you're going to get with him. And I think he's contributed. You know, Liverpool have won a Premier League, they've won trophies, and he's contributed to that. But it does feel like the end of the road. He needs something fresh. He needs to be a main man somewhere. And Liverpool want to reinvest those funds elsewhere.
Yeah, they've got signed Tuba as well. Do you presume that he goes in above Nunes anyway?
Yes, absolutely. I think he is a sign of the new Liverpool. See, the old Liverpool was pretty good, winning the Premier League. But I think Arne Slot's thinking about combination play. I think he's thinking about how you can break down teams that are quite deep and want to defend against Liverpool, especially at Anfield. And if you look at Ekitike, he's quite unusual in some ways. He's very mobile. He's very creative. He's quite happy to be a facilitator. He's not like Roberto Firmino. Nobody's quite like Bobby Firmino. But where he's similar is that he's quite happy to be a member of the collective. It's not about his ego. He likes getting assists just as much as goals. And what we saw last season was he dovetailed beautifully with Omar Marmoush. And then when Marmoush made the move to Manchester City mid-season, he was still able to step up and play more of a senior role to help Frankfurt get over the line and qualify for the Champions League.
Just quickly on that point, Kevin. So if Liverpool do bring in another number 9, if it is Isak or someone else, where do you say Ekitike playing in that system? Could he be moved out on the left? Or
he could. And I think Liverpool are going to need this depth, and I think that's something that they've recognised. If they want to go deep in the Champions League, win the Premier League again, win other tournaments, they want to be in a situation where, you know, if they were to bring in another striker, if they were to bring in Isak, well, if he has injury problems, which he has had, you need another top 9, and he can be that. But also, you could play in different ways. Ekitike can drift out wide. He can be put on that left-hand side. You've got depth with Cody Gakpo there. And what we saw with Luis Diaz and Gakpo to some extent is that rotation anyway in that forward line. Wirtz is going to help with that as well, because he'll knit the whole thing together.
exciting if you're a Liverpool fan.
Yeah, I would say so. One huge story over the weekend saw HeungMin Son announce he'll leave Tottenham this summer. Played his last game yesterday. Very emotional day it was for him and for Tottenham fans as well. Dan, where's he going to? Do we know?
It looks like, Tom, that he could be very well on his way to the USA. LAFC look like the favourites at this moment in time to secure that deal for the Tottenham captain. As we can see there, HeungMin Son saying goodbye at the airport to his teammates. And as you can imagine, it must have been so emotional for him out in South Korea. And I think for Son, I mean, he ends his reign at Spurs, having won that Europa League title out in Bilbao as captain. And when you look at a potential move to the MLS for LAFC, they have 2 designated player spots available for them, which means that they can pay over the cap salary that the MLS have for incomings, which you would imagine they would use on someone like Son. Just to give you a bit more context about LAFC, currently 6th in the MLS, still have 12 games of the regular MLS season left. So you would imagine for Son being in the middle of pre-season, if he does make this move, he won't be playing right away. It might take a few weeks to get into rhythm and match fitness for LAFC, but it looks like that's very much where he could be going. But a very lovely moment, I would say, that he was able to have with Tottenham, his teammates out in South Korea, of course, his homeland.
But Tottenham have strengthened another area of the pitch, though, while this is going on. João Palhinha. Kevin, why has he found game time so hard to come by out in the Bundesliga?
He's kind of been a victim of circumstance, really. If you cast your mind back, Thomas Tuchel, when he was buying coach, was quite happy to upset Joshua Kimmich, quite happy to upset Leon Goretzka and say publicly, I want a genuine number 6. I want a midfield destroyer. They wanted Palhinha to come in. That deal looked as though it was going to happen and it collapsed late on. Bayern still did the deal a year later, but Tuchel had gone. Vincent Kompany didn't have a place for him really in that midfield. Kimmich was made the main man again. Goretzka, they were nudging towards the exit a year ago, and he said, no, I'm not going anywhere. So he knuckled down, fought for his place, and got that place alongside Kimmich. So there wasn't really a place for Palhinha in that team. You've got Alex Pavlovic there as well. So he had a few injury problems. I felt he was trying a bit too hard at times when he was given an opportunity in the team. But I still believe for the Premier League, he's still a great fit in terms of tackling machine, somebody who could be a really good screen for the back line. I think it's a really sensible move by Spurs.
And speaking of injury problems, Dan, James Maddison out injured again. Will that change the transfer plans between now and the 1st of September?
Yeah, really sad scenes really for James Maddison, having just recovered from his knee injury that he suffered at the end of last season. 5 minutes left against Newcastle yesterday. He was stretchered off, which was an injury to the same knee. He had that injury at the end of last season. We know Tottenham were interested in bringing in an attacking midfielder. They failed to bring in Nottingham Forest, Morgan Gibbs-White. So they're still looking in that area. And also a fullback with this injury now. You would imagine Thomas Frank and Tottenham will look to really accelerate a search for that attacking midfielder, because although they have plenty of other midfielders who can sit in front of that defence, they are lacking in attacking options in that area, especially with Son leaving as well. They may look to reinforce the wide positions as well.
There's plenty more to come from Kevin and Dan here on Good Morning Transfers. Busy summer for Chelsea, but could get even busier. Plus, what's next for Johan Wissa? Right, how about this? Porto fans were treated to the unveiling of a new signing this weekend. Former Norwich man Borja Sainz, but in a shock move by the club, they followed it up by bringing out a surprise signing that nobody knew about. It was Luke de Jong. He was unveiled. It was fair to say it took the crowd by surprise. And they all look very happy as well. Now, here's to a few transfers that we do know about. Newcastle United and Manchester United are in talks with RB Leipzig over the signing of striker Benjamin Sesko. Al Nassr have failed an attempt to sign Manchester United captain Bruno Fernandez. What else we got? We've got Chelsea. They've completed the signing of teenage defender Jarell Hatto from Ajax. Mark Gu's flight to the northeast was postponed on Sunday, but that does not mean, we're told, that the loan deal from Chelsea to Sunderland is dead. He's expected to join and have his medical soon. Birmingham City, they're expected to sign Ajax striker Tuba despite a last-ditch attempt from Middlesbrough to hijack the deal. The under-21-year-old is in England to undergo a medical. That's not him, by the way. I think you know that already. He'll go on a season-long loan deal to Birmingham. But now to this one. Rangers have agreed a £3 million deal to sign go-ahead Eagles winger Oliver Antman. And Steven Alzate will have a medical with MLS side Atalanta today, ahead of signing a 5.5-year deal from Hull. Now don't forget, you can keep across all of the latest information as it happens on our dedicated Transfer Centre blog. Scan the QR code on your screen, it will take you straight there. There was big news yesterday around Ademola Lookman, a lot of interest in him, but he made his feelings very clear on social media. Kevin, explain this one. What happened with Ademola Lookman?
So it was a very public transfer request. He has said to Atalanta that he wants to go this summer. And it was quite a long social media post. And it was quite heartfelt, really. He was talking about how he's always tried to do right by the club. He's always tried to keep things quiet when there have been issues in the background, which we believe there have been. There were some clashes with the old coach, Gianpiero Gasperini, at times. And he said that the club had agreed to let him go if there was a bid of a certain level. He believes that's come in from Inter and that he should be allowed to pursue that move. But Atalanta have blocked that, at least in the short term. You have to bear in mind the progress that he's made, Lookman, in his time at Atalanta, because he wrote himself into club folklore with that hat-trick in the Europa League final against Bayer Leverkusen. That was a phenomenal performance. That was the only game Leverkusen lost in any competition that season, and he was absolutely brilliant. He's been linked with moves before. He was linked with PSG last season, and again, that didn't quite happen. Atalanta didn't allow him to move. So the fact that he feels he has to take this step says to me, A, that Atalanta are blocking him at this stage and that he feels he has to add a bit more pressure. But also, I do think he's very conscious about how he's perceived by the Atalanta fans. I think that link, that bond with them has always been very important to him.
Yes, I think that story is going to go on for a little while longer yet. As for Chelsea, they have spent over £250 million this summer. The latest signing came yesterday in Jarell Hatto for £35.5 million plus add-ons from Ajax. We'll go back to you, Kevin, on this one. I know you've seen him a lot more than we have. What can Chelsea fans expect?
Well, what they can expect is cover for Marc Cucurella, so he's not going to be driven into the ground and he won't have to play every game. He's become such a focal point for Chelsea, such an important player for them. But Hatto, I think, can cover that left-back role. He can play centre-back. He's somebody who's a good one-on-one defender. You never quite know how that's going to translate from the Eredivisie, but he's still a really, really young player, but he's racked up a lot of games for Ajax. And that's a big club with its own pressures, and an Ajax team that struggled as well. So he's had to deal with that media spotlight. He's had to deal with quite a difficult situation there, and he's come through it really well. So I think this is really sensible from Chelsea. It covers multiple positions, and he's somebody that I think is going to really develop. The key is how much game time does he get, and can Enzo Maresca get the absolute maximum out of him? I think he's comfortable moving into midfield, which we know Maresca likes. So I think you'll see a lot of that as well.
Dan, another midfielder, Xavi Simons. He wasn't in Leipzig's pre-season squad this weekend. That tends to say that something could well be happening, and potentially another incoming at Stamford Bridge.
Yeah, absolutely. And, we reported all last week that how interested Chelsea are in bringing Xavi because we talked earlier that he likes to go by Xavi rather than Xavi Simons.
Just for
so Xavi it is, but how interested Chelsea are in bringing him in. And I think for Xavi, he's looking at this as, he wants to play European football. He wants to really accelerate that development and progression, because he might not get that at RB Leipzig. And I think for Xavi as well, I think if I was a Chelsea fan, I would look at maybe the second half of last season and see that Cole Palmer even admitted himself. He had a bit of a spell where he just needed a break. He needed to have a bit more of the share amongst the squad in terms of the creative flair. And I think someone like Xavi might be the ideal player to really share that burden, that responsibility, especially when you consider the likes of a Christopher Nkunku could leave in that position and leave a gap in the squad to replace.
Leipzig went into this summer knowing that Sesko and Xavi were the two saleable assets, most saleable assets. So I think the plan was always for them to go. When they made the move from PSG permanent, I think the plan was always to move him on at some stage. And I think you're absolutely right. Leipzig have just come off a pretty awful season by their standards. Failed to qualify for Europe for the first time as a Bundesliga club. They were dreadful in the Champions League, but he still performed pretty well. So I think this move makes a lot of sense. My question about Xavi is, yes, the technical quality's there, goals, assists, all that stuff, fine. How's he going to deal with not being the main man? Because you're not at Chelsea. Cole Palmer is. So how's he going to deal with that? So I'll be really fascinated to see how that shakes down.
Now, Dan, Armando Broja could be leaving Chelsea. Looks like he is leaving Chelsea. Who else could leave? What's the latest with Broja first, and who else could leave?
Yeah, so first of all, Burnley in advance talks with Chelsea over a potential deal for Armando Broja. We don't think there'll be any kind of issues in terms of personal terms on a potential 5-year contract for Broja, who we saw a few years ago had a really good spell at Southampton, but really hasn't been able to replicate that, mainly down due to injuries. We saw really struggled at Everton because of that last year. But, we talk about all the incomings at Chelsea. Do you think sometimes we need to give credit to a side who can sell incredibly well? And when you look at what they've been able to do since Enzo Maresca has arrived at the club, especially, it has been incredible, really, when you look at the sales, even in this window, the likes of João Felix, and they still have many more sales that they could make this window, the likes of Raheem Sterling, the likes of Vega as well, and Axel Disasi, we saw on loan Aston Villa last season as well. So very interesting for Chelsea. Although they are bringing in players that, as we understand, still potentially interested in Alejandro Garnacho, there's still some incomings to be done. But you look at the players there. I mean, Connie Chukwuemeka, Kevin, of course, on loan at Dortmund second half of last season. I mean, talk to me in terms of the European clubs who could be a player here. There is a lot of value in some of those players who could do a job.
Well, Bayern have looked at Nkunku a few times. They were looking at him when he was at Leipzig. Chukwuemeka's an interesting one because I think he made a good impression at Dortmund. They would love to loan him again or do a permanent deal at terms that are acceptable to them, because they have to be a little bit careful. They have sold Jamie Gittins for big money, but they don't have a huge amount to play with. But I think Chukwuemeka's a guy they'd love to bring in. They see him as somebody with real potential. Renato Vega's been linked with Atletico, but that fell through. He's been linked with Bayern as well. But he was an interesting one because when he was signed, didn't really have that track record that you thought that makes a lot of sense. And as it's turned out, they're going to sell him. So there's some really good players on that list, and they just keep on player trading. And you look at Gittins, he comes in. They're being linked with Garnacho, being linked with Xavi, who naturally moves out to that left-hand side. Straight away, he's in a battle for his position. I'm not saying he shouldn't be, but he's a very young man, and straight away you're in the fire. It's quite
He was the main man of Dortmund a little bit in his position, yeah.
And then lost his place towards the end of the season. So there's a guy that probably is a bit of a fixer-up and needs a bit of a boost. Good luck with that, Jamie. See how you get on.
Yeah, Datro Fofana could have been on that list as well. So Chelsea are recouping money. They're not just spending it. As we've seen from the list there, players who are available, more to come in. Now, it's been a turbulent summer at Brentford. The head coach has left, as has captain Christian Norgard, and Brian Mbeumo has gone to Manchester United. Will Johan Wissa leave as well? What's the latest, Dan?
Well, this is one of the sagas of the window so far, isn't it, Tom? I mean, first of all, let's start at the beginning. Brentford have remained adamant throughout the window that Wissa is not for sale in this window. As you mentioned, having already lost two key players in Mbeumo and Christian Norgard as well. They rejected a 25 million bid from Newcastle earlier in this window. No matter if Newcastle remain interested or not, they've kept that stance of he is not for sale. We saw him at the training ground on Friday to have some discussions with the club around his future. But then interestingly, over the weekend, Brentford travelled to Loftus Road to face QPR on Saturday. He did not travel with the squad. He wasn't part of Keith Andrews' squad. And now to Monday, to bring you to modern day, we understand the club are off today, so we are not expected, as his teammates, expected to be at the training ground. But he is expected to train with the rest of his teammates this week, and it remains to be seen whether Newcastle do come back with another bid or potentially other suitors. But what we do know is Brentford have been adamant he is not for sale, and this is what their boss Keith Andrews had to say after that 1-0 win about him.
The word strike's been thrown around. Is that overstating it?
Yeah, I think so, yeah. I think the fact that Wiss has obviously come back from Portugal, he's a little bit behind in the group. He's training very, very hard at the moment just to bridge that gap, and we expect him to come back into the group over the next few days.
Breaking news, it's about another striker, and it is a twist when it comes to Tuba Akpom, because Ipswich Town have made a late approach to Ajax to sign the striker. Remember, we've just been telling you only a few minutes ago that the player was due to have a medical with Birmingham City at some point today. We know that Middlesbrough were in for him. Olympiacos were also keen on getting him. Now, if the deals are agreed with more than one club, the decision will rest, of course, with the player. But Birmingham, they've agreed a season-long loan with an obligation to buy for £7 million if Birmingham are promoted. So that's what's on the table right now. But Ipswich have made a late approach as well. So Birmingham have competition. Now stay with us, because as it's the first time we've had Kevin with us all summer, we'll be getting his thoughts on some of the moves that have caught his eye in this week. taking you back to 2003 for our On This Day transfer. Freddie Canute made the move from West Ham to Tottenham. It was worth £3.5 million back then, bargain. And Glenn Hoddle was the Tottenham manager. It was his third signing that summer. Spent 2 years in North London. He scored 22 goals in 73 games. Now, we are about to get to Everton, but before we do that, we've got some developing news, breaking news really, from Newcastle, because our cameras have caught Newcastle's Alexander Isak arriving at the club's training ground in the last 5 minutes. Now, we were expecting him back, despite his future at the club remaining unclear. So we'll bring you those pictures as soon as we can. But Alexander Isak is right now at the Newcastle United training ground. Now, Everton boss David Moyes made his feelings this summer very clear, saying that he needs up to 10 new players. Speaking overnight, he said he's hopeful there'll be new additions this week.
We have to make several additions and more, we know that, even for the numbers. And you know, we might even have people in the squad who we'd like to maybe put them out loan or do other things with them. We're needing generally to add to the squad, and we need to get some of the main players in quickly. But I've been sort of saying it from near enough from the minute we finished against Newcastle United. I've been on the case that we have to get it done, and it's just felt, I generally feel we should be further down, but in the main it looks as if we're getting closer to things, and hopefully maybe a few things might come to fruition this week.
It's all happening. Very busy morning. More breaking news. It comes from the Championship, though, and from Sheffield United, to be precise. They're close to completing a deal for the SC Braga midfielder. That's Djibril Soumaré. We've been told there's a verbal agreement between the two clubs. It would be a season-long loan, which would become an obligation for Sheffield United to buy the player if they are promoted to the Premier League. Remember, they came very close to getting promoted to the Premier League last season. The final details of the move are being worked on by both parties, but Sheffield United close to completing a loan deal for midfielder Djibril Soumaré from Braga. Right, now let's talk about some done deals around Europe now that we've got Kevin Hatchard with us, our European football expert, of course. Forest fans want to know more about Dan Ndoye.
I think they should be really excited about this, because he's somebody that has done really well for Bologna in the last couple of seasons, scored the winning goal in the Coppa Italia final against Milan. And the way he took that goal tells you about him, because he's not a regular goal scorer, but he should be scoring more goals. And I think that's going to come. He showed great composure, danced past a couple of players, slammed the shot in and won the cup final. He had a big jump last season in terms of his goals and assists from what he'd done before. But what I really like about him for Forest is he carries the ball incredibly well. He's physically able to deal with the Premier League, I think. He's quick. He can play on the left, he can play on the right. And I think for that counter-attacking style that Forest have, I think he's made for that. So I know Forest fans would have been dismayed at losing Elanga to Newcastle, but actually he's a guy that can come in and I think can make an impact.
We just heard from David Moyes saying that he was hoping a bit further down the line on transfers with Everton, but they have got Tierno Barry. What will he add? I'm
really glad that a Premier League team has taken a chance on him. He is raw. He is somebody that does have ragged moments in his game, but he makes things happen. He's always trying to run in behind. He's always trying to affect the game. He's tall, but he's pretty mobile as well. And he did well for Villarreal last season, scored a fair few goals. And I think if Everton just bang the ball up to him constantly, that's not going to work. But if they can get players around him, I think he can make a real impact on their game. So I'm rooting for him, and I'm really glad that somebody's taken a punt on him, because he's bounced around different clubs, but he's got quality.
Well, it sounds like that could be good news for Everton, hopefully. And Arsenal, I think they certainly see Zubamendi as good news when they signed him.
I think he's really important for them, because we know that he was very close important for them to a year ago, and that didn't happen. It worked out for Liverpool because Gravenberch ended up making that number 6 role his own. But you're talking about a quality player that's won a major trophy with Spain, somebody who came into that Euros final for Rodri and didn't miss a beat. Somebody who's very calm in possession. His numbers in terms of winning possession back in La Liga are good. He's going to have to make a physical step in the Premier League, but I think he's capable of doing that. But the other thing that he can do is he can release Declan Rice to get forward a bit more often. And I think that's going to be really important. So he can set the tempo and control a game.
Got loads more to get through with you in Transfer Talk later on. Good Morning Transfers is back tomorrow, by the way, 9 a.m. Former interim manager Simon Rusk is our guest. Transfer Talk's back at midday with Dan and Kev. Both of you come back, aren't you? And we've got the transfer show tonight as well. Okay, loads more transfer news to come, especially around Alexander Isak.